Thank you. Our next speaker is a distinguished healthcare leader with over 30 years of experience across 3 continents. Her career spans roles from staff nurse to director, and she has served as adjunct faculty at City University London and New Buckinghamshire University. In recognition of her contributions, she was awarded the Order of the British Empire (OB) in 2001, is a Mary C. Cole Leadership Scholar, and a Fellow of the Institute of Leadership and Management. She currently serves on the International Committee of the Royal College of Nursing and is the inaugural editor-in-chief of the Journal of Nursing Science and Professional Practice. Today, she will be speaking on the topic of generative artificial intelligence and the future of nursing, embracing innovation while safeguarding care. Let us all welcome Dr. Kathy Sienko.
Yes.
Right here. Okay. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Okay, so you all sounding quite energetic after lunch, right? Which is not, it's not the normal thing because people normally get a bit lethargic and tired. So I'm really appreciative of your attention and your energy. Normally at this stage, I have to do an energizer, but I don't think I have to do it with you. You're full of energy. So first of all, I want to thank and acknowledge Ariel and Dr. Ahmed, Ms. Jaya, Salvi, Ahmed, and the whole team who took the conference on for inviting me. I always feel really honored and blessed actually to be at conferences because it's only ever 50% about you and the other 50% is about me because I get to learn a lot of stuff when I come to conferences as well. And so whenever anybody asks me, and can you hear me at the back?
No,
You can't? It's like very tinny. You can't hear me?
Yeah.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
All right, let me see if this works a little bit better. Hold on. Is that any better now? This doesn't sound better.
Looks like today.
All right, I think we're going to have to put it here at the mic.
Try the other one.
All right, so I think the trick is that I probably need to keep this mic right here. Yeah, so grateful to everyone who invited me because there are so many people that you could invite to speak at a conference. So whenever I get invited, I'm always surprised, always honored, and always really blessed and feel really blessed because I know I'm going to learn something as well as speak to things that I have some knowledge of. So for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Dr. Kathy Sienko. I'm the Executive Director for Nursing Affairs at King Faisal Specialist Hospital and Research Centre in Jeddah. And we were the first hospital in the region and outside of the US for quite a while to be magnet accredited. The first was AUB. And then for a long time, they did not follow up on that. We are now 3 times magnet accredited. And like you, we are really just trying to do a good job for our patients, right? That's what it comes down to. I am totally passionate about nursing. I could have done anything in my life. I could have been a CEO. I could have been a COO. I told somebody before on a radio show I could even have been prime minister, but I chose to be a nurse. And I'd like to think that that is the potential of each of you that is in this room. But somehow you ended up in nursing, and that is not by accident. I always say to people that God chooses special people to be nurses because he knows the care and the compassion that will be required, and not everyone is capable of that. Today, I've been asked to speak about generative AI and the future of nursing, and how do we embrace innovation and continue to safeguard care and compassion. That's a big challenge to all of us because it is so exciting. It's so easy to be excited by the technology. If I tell you that the biggest problem that my nurses report on a daily basis, apart from telling me how they feel they're short of staff, which they're not, but I bet that's what you do too, right?
Yes.
The biggest problem they report is how much technology takes them away from being with patients. Do you experience that as well? Do you feel that sometimes?
Yeah.
That you're filling out so much paperwork and you're doing so much JCIA stuff and whatever the local regulatory requirement is, that it's removing you from patient care?
Yes. Yeah.
So this whole idea of how do we embrace innovation but continue to demonstrate care and compassion, I think is really an important question. If you're wondering what qualifies me to speak to AI, I actually spent 10 years of my career working in technology. So how many people have heard about the company Oracle? Okay, so before the company I worked for was not always part of Oracle, they were called Cerner. And some of you might have worked in organizations that have Cerner software, right? So I worked for Cerner for about 5 years as the director for education and training, and then I worked as the director for consulting operations, and then I covered Europe for healthcare advisory. So I covered France and Spain, and Germany and Ireland and England. I also worked for British Telecom for about 5 years, working in marketing communications, clinical advisory, and safety engineering. And I don't know about you, but when I was training to be a nurse, there was nothing about safety engineering or marketing communications, right? But what that tells you is that as nurses, we have a skill set that enables us to work anywhere and enables us to do just about anything when we put our minds to it. So this is why I'm not concerned about how you will navigate the future with technology. I'm absolutely not bothered at all, because if you think about, if you know my history, I was someone who was very afraid. Many of you are much younger than I am, but I got my first computer years ago, and it had to be brought to the house and built up in the house. And it was an MS-DOS based computer. And I don't know how many of you remember having to plug in your computer and it would make that. Remember that? Right? So that's when I started with computers. And I was never computer savvy. I learned computing quite by learning by doing. I tell you this story to say that none of what you will hear in this conference and none of what is out there today is anything to be scared about. I think we should be concerned, we should be curious, we should be engaged, but we have no reason to be scared by it. Because the tools that will enable you to proactively engage with artificial intelligence are very simple tools. I know we're all really excited and some probably even a little bit concerned about the robots. And the robot's going to take over our jobs. So here's how I tell you the story. If the robot is the hardware that emerges from artificial intelligence, then everybody in this room is the software. Because what is generative AI? It is about the accumulation of knowledge, large data sets of knowledge that is turned into intelligence that allows us to do things more quickly, more simply, to a higher quality than we ourselves could do at any given time. But it does not speak for care and compassion. What revolutionized my life with technology? How did I get passionate about technology? I learned to undo. I was in a Word intermediate class. I was already managing a hospital in London. I was in a Word intermediate class, and the instructor said, I'm going to show you how to navigate your way around Word. And she took us to the banner bar and she said, this little hook is called undo. If you make a mistake and it's not at the level of code, you can undo any mistake you made over, I think back then it was about 10 moves. I don't know if I learned anything else on that course because I was so excited about undo. Because what do you think happened? I started trying stuff, right? I started trying to do stuff because I knew that if I made a mistake, I could just undo it. And that is how I became really passionate about technology, because I started learning that actually the technology wasn't as smart as I thought it was. It needed me to enable it to do what it needed to do. So let me get into my presentation because I know I only have a short period of time and I probably talked out 5 minutes of it. All right, so we're going to spend just a little bit of time because I know when we think about artificial intelligence, there are some terms that just get put into the same bucket and they're not all the same thing, although they're part of this thing that we call AI, right? So artificial intelligence speaks to computer systems that are capable of performing really complex tasks, right? And these things were historically the domain of things like human reasoning, like how we take a lot of time to reason stuff through, decision making and solving problems. So it's not about the robot, right? All of this requires you, everything that you're doing right now. When you go online to do your banking, when you go into your car and you put your satellite navigation on, if you're using Waze or you're using Google Maps or whatever, when you trying to book your travel, when you go onto Facebook and you have things that are suggested to you, all of that is data that is feeding generative AI. The generative element of it is that all of that data is being used to generate new knowledge and new intelligence. So it is the kind of, when you think about what generative AI is, it's the kind of AI that creates things like images, text, videos, and other medias, but it has to have prompts. So one of the parts of that is about natural language processing. So how many people use ChatGPT today? Anybody heard of ChatGPT? Right, you all heard about it, right? So if you wrote an essay, we'll talk about the ethics around that in a little bit. You wrote an essay, you wrote a piece for a journal, like my journal, you are doing some scientific work. It is very easy, and I'll show you some examples, to run that through ChatGPT and for it to come up with something that looks absolutely beautiful. I can tell you, because I write quite a lot on LinkedIn, I can tell you that every time I run my stuff through ChatGPT, I end up putting it back into the original format because it looks beautiful, but it feels quite cold. It doesn't quite convey the sentiment or the warmth that I would like it to convey. And therefore, I always end up reverting to what I had written in the first place from my own heart. I say that to tell you that although all of these forms of artificial intelligence and subfields of artificial intelligence can help us to do things, it cannot replace, none of them can replace your warmth, your compassion, your caring, and the real connection that patients desire when they're at their most vulnerable. So for those of you who are here today hoping to see a ton of tools and fancy stuff, I'll tell you, you're not going to see that, right? You'll see some of it, but not all of that. Because what I'm here to tell you is that that's not the important stuff. First of all, the field is too new. It is in too much of its infancy for organizations to invest large scale in some of the gadgets and things that you see. And I see that Dr. April is on your agenda today, and she'll tell you about some of the cool stuff, that the gadgetry that's happening today, right? But for a lot of organizations who are thinking about where they spend their money, it is too new and nascent for large-scale investment at this point. And secondly, as I said, our focus really needs to be on what are the problems we're trying to solve in healthcare and nursing practice. That's really where we need to start. There are enough clever people out there, and I'm sure Dr. later will probably talk to you about some stuff. There are enough clever people out there to build you things. But what are the problems you're trying to solve by building those things? Those are the questions to ask yourself.
Alexa, what is generative AI?
So how many people got Alexa? All right. So if you got Alexa, right, you probably have some interesting conversations apart from just play some music, right? Your favorite song. And I know I have a couple of friends who very much enamored with Alexa, but they tell me that Alexa speaks to them even when they haven't spoken to her. Right? Does that happen to you? Yeah. So all of us are already engaged with artificial intelligence. The idea that we get scared about it in healthcare comes from the fact that we are concerned about safety, harm, ethics, accountability. Right? Those are the things that we have to be concerned about in healthcare. So if you ask me what generative AI is it a response to the growth of knowledge? Research tells us that knowledge is growing at a pace that far outstrips anything that we can think manually. Every field of knowledge that you can think about wound care. Nurses, think about wound care. How much has practice changed in relation to wound care over the last 5 years? Anybody seen a change? Put your hand up. Yeah. A lot changes, the research changes, the data changes. What is effective and not effective changes. And therefore, AI definitely is a response to the exponential growth of knowledge. Why wouldn't we want to harness as much knowledge as possible in healthcare if it is possible for us to do that? Is it a natural progression in the way that we retrieve knowledge? So many of us are knowledge users, right? So do you remember having to go to the library, sit with 1 million books to try to get the knowledge you wanted, and you have 10, 15 books on a table to write an essay because you're trying and you're printing off reams of paper in the library trying to get articles to reference? How easy is that process now? How easy is it to retrieve knowledge? But there are risks with that, right? Because when you think about ChatGPT, not everything that is in there is good knowledge. So we'll come to that in a little bit. Is it a field that is evolving at a rapid pace? Absolutely. As I said earlier on, it is a nascent field. If we feel right now that AI is a big thing, it is only going to get much bigger. And is it an invaluable opportunity to deliver more person-centered and personalized healthcare? Is it a better way? Has it got the potential for us to achieve some of the goals that we have always had for healthcare? I think the answer is it's all of those things. But here's what happens. I often fear the things that we cannot see clearly or that we do not know. Right? If you look at this chess piece against the shadow is way bigger than the piece itself. And that's what use of technology often feels like. It feels way more scary than it really is. So we often fear what we do not understand and what we do not know. And things often look far greater in their magnitude than when you see them in the real. Have you ever seen a picture of something that gave you one impression and then when you saw it, you were like, that's it? Yeah? So that's what I feel about AI, right? It's important, it's large, it's huge, it has potential, it's all of those things. But it's not something that we need to be afraid of. So back in the 80s, when the US Department of Education decided to use calculators in the classroom, teachers rioted. They protested. They said that it would cause students to cheat. that it would dumb them down as far as math was concerned and calculus. And it was a huge, huge thing. Apart from what's on your phone, how many of you use a calculator today? Very few of us, right? I use a calculator, but I'm old. I'm 56 years old. And I like my calculator, right? But it's difficult now to go into a shop, to go into Generative bookstore or wherever, and try to find a calculator. Like young people look at you like, are you for real? Like people still use those like back in the day, right? So all of the things that we are concerned about today, in 10 years' time, 5 years' time, 3 years' time, it's not going to be a thing anymore. Nobody's going to be concerned about it anymore. Right? So what I say to people is keep calm. Because it's not about the technology. It's about what we will come to know to do our jobs better, to serve patients better, to make our lives and their lives easier. So let's talk a little bit about some of those things. So when we think about healthcare and nursing, what are some of the ways in which we can benefit from artificial intelligence? In nursing, hospital-acquired pressure injury and falls in the acute sector are a big thing. They're not a big thing just because they're nurse-sensitive indicators. They're a big thing because they have an impact on your financial bottom line. Every patient who falls and gets an injury stays in hospital way longer than they should. That is a cost to your organization in nursing care, in supplies, in equipment. It is a cost in terms of the patient experience. It is a cost in terms of potential mortality and morbidity risks. It is a cost because whereas you should be admitting 2 more patients into that bed, you now have a long stay patient because that patient fell. And Happy has the same issue. So what if it were easier for us to predict who would actually fall? Who would actually develop a pressure injury? We have tools that we use today, right? We have Braden, we have all sorts of scores that we use. But does that ever stop all of your patients from getting pressure injuries? No. Absolutely. So what if we could predict it with much more accuracy? And I use Happy and falls because the majority of you in this room are nurses. But there were way bigger implications as far as predictive analytics is concerned. When you think about the level of population, I don't know what the diabetes prevalence is here in Kuwait, but in Saudi it is quite high, it's in the 40s. Right? So when you think about large data sets, it is to that level, and it is at the level of the bedside nurse or the care delivery nurse, because I know not all of you are at the bedside. Clinical decision support, how does it help us to not have to have such variability between what I think should happen in care and what I'm calling you by your sister's name, Miss Barial thinks should happen for a similar case? When you have clinical decision support that is based on best practice and care pathways, you reduce the variability in patient outcomes. You reduce the variability in the types of supplies that we use. I've set up new hospitals before. Every surgeon for the same specialty wants something different, different set of instrumentation. And yet, what would it be like if we knew for a fact that this one set of instruments would serve everybody's needs? And that's just one example. Precision medicine. So my sister, unfortunately, just died of lymphoma about 4 weeks ago yesterday. And we didn't know that she'd had lymphoma. It came up as a lump on her jaw. Right? That's how it started. But what if, in some way, we would be able to tell by using her bloods and other markers what would be the right kind of treatment for her? She had everything. She had 7 rounds of chemotherapy. She had bone marrow transplant. She had radiation therapy, but nothing actually worked in the end. What if we could improve the lives of those patients who have cancers by looking at what they needed as opposed to what we did for everybody else, right? That is what precision medicine actually is. Patient monitoring, smart beds, smart pumps. How many of you have back pain every now and then? Don't put your hand up. But I know you do. Right, backache is a thing. When you're moving patients, you're turning them, you're rolling them. If you're working in a country where obesity is an issue, then chances are you've got a few heavy patients, right? But what if you had a smart bed that was able to tell you where the pressure areas were per patient, that were able to help you turn, that were pulling that data into your medical records, so that you then knew the risk profile of your patient in terms of pressure injury? Wouldn't that be something cool to happen? It's happening already. Unfortunately, it's not available everywhere for everyone. Because again, when you're the chief executive or you're the chief nurse of an organization, you're having to think about how well developed is the technology to where you feel you want to make an investment in it. When you have your smart pumps and you have bedside medical device integration, where that data is just pulling into your INO chart, so that you don't have to take the piece of paper to write it down to then go put it in the system, or to look at the pump to then go type it into the system, but it's pulling in, and not only is it pulling in, it is interacting with the other data that is coming in to the system to help you make great decisions about changes in the plan of care or to assess the effectiveness of what you're doing. That's when you get to spend more time with your patients, because after all, isn't that what we want? Isn't that why we came into healthcare? It's so that we could be with people, because healthcare is essentially a people profession. Let me just see. And then you think about diagnostic and treatment recommendations. You think about record keeping. So my nurses absolutely hate the amount of time they spend on record keeping. Do you hate the amount of time you spend on record keeping? Yeah. Yeah, because we actually want to be with the patient. But, and I think Ms. April will speak about this later on, what if you could turn your semantic text into codified data that helps you to meet the requirements of JCIA and everybody else, and safety and quality, and provide a better patient experience? So what would it be like if you admitted me and you were just talking to me as I came into my room? Welcome, Miss Kathy. My name is Selvi. We thank you for choosing us. I'm going to be doing your assessment, and you're walking through your assessment with your patient, and you're just having a natural conversation. I know you'd probably like a cup of tea, but the doctors want you to be nil by mouth because you're going for some investigations. What if that nil by mouth was actually putting into the record, right? So how do we know this patient is nil by mouth, right? They haven't had anything to drink. Can you tell me the last time you passed urine? Did you pass urine this morning? Could you tell me the last time you had your bowels open? That's the sort of thing we do for a nursing assessment, right? Do you know your height? Do you know your weight? And you and your patient are having a conversation, and all of that data is just populating your nursing assessment. Wouldn't that be like the coolest thing? Because you see, what we do, and patients complain about it all the time, is we feed the computer, right? So we take the cow into the room, and we're doing the assessment, and we turn our back to the patient, and we back like this, and we turn our back again. And the patient, who's newly admitted and vulnerable and in pain and all of those things, feels like you actually don't care. That you care more about the computer than you care about me. And I can promise you probably get some of those complaints.
Yes.
Yeah?
Sorry.
Yes.
I can enjoy it, but we have 3 minutes.
Okay. We have 3 minutes. So think about your nurse education and how you can use simulation in nurse education. I'm timing myself, right? Okay. And then patient experience and your patient reported outcome measures. So how can you get involved with AI? Get curious. Ask questions. Questions are your friend. You don't have to know everything. But ask questions. What is this? How does it work? Why do we need to have it? Learn stuff. Just go on the internet and learn stuff. Coursera has all sorts of cool things that you can learn. Just go educate yourself. Get engaged. Don't wait for it to happen and you say, why do they always give us stuff that we don't need? And the nurses didn't get involved. Get engaged with technology and contribute your knowledge. What you have as knowledge is very precious. Contribute it. So these are ways in which we use AI in our care, right? So first you have just a prompt. This is a simple form of AI. It's a prompt, right? Weight alert. This patient is overweight or underweight. But then you have the aggregation of data that says, because of all that I'm seeing, this patient is now at high risk of falls, right? That's the levels of complexity that you get with AI. So this is from one of our neurologists who did this ECG and then did the MRI, put the data into ChatGPT and concluded that it came up with a diagnosis that was perhaps way more than he himself would have come up with. Now, I don't know that I would have said that, but that was his thing. And actually what they were doing was just kind of testing that out. How intelligent is ChatGPT as far as medical diagnosis is concerned? So use AI as a tool to collaborate. Use it for upskilling and education. Go into the system. You can have tools where you can see things in real time, like wounds, right? You can go in and you can see pictures of real wounds and you can begin to learn what is the best dressing, what is the stage 1, what's the stage 2, what is stage 3. Think about the ethical considerations. Who is accountable in the world of AI? Who is actually accountable for care? And to what extent do you incorporate it into your care? What about patient privacy? What about their data security? And what about trust? Because that's what patients tell us, right? That they trust nurses to do their best for them. And then how can we transform what we do? What's about virtual nursing? What if you could just monitor patients, have a group of nurses monitoring patients from afar, like we do with virtual ICU, all right? Balance, innovation, compassion, and care. Compassion and care are the cornerstones of nursing. We must never forget it. And be actively engaged. And above all, think about that. There will never become a time when the machine is responsible for what we do. We are always going to be accountable and responsible for our care. So Salvi was very concerned about that I would have to put some references in. And so here's the last reference I'll put in for you. Salvi, I'm coming up to your reference. So what I will say is that machines cannot optimize for care, compassion, and even the things like happiness and joy. If you want a bit of advice from me, let the machine do what it does, but you do you. And if the you is a nurse, continue to do you. Salvi, this is for you. Right? If you want to think about what is important, don't think about the gadgets. Think about the problem. What is the problem that you're trying to solve in your practice? There are enough clever people in this world who will come up with solutions.